Night Shift Whispers.
The day had already grown dim when Giandra and I arrived in a hilly rural area. I hadn't anticipated that the journey to this place would take so long, and strangely, Giandra hadn't mentioned it beforehand, despite this not being her first visit. This was Elena's hometown, a college friend of ours. A few days ago, Giandra and I called her to invite her for a beach vacation, only to learn that she was already at her hometown. Giandra suggested that we should just join her there. The village where Elena's parents lived was no less idyllic than the beach, a perfect holiday spot. Elena usually welcomed her friends with open arms, but when we expressed our desire to visit, she hesitated for a few minutes. There was a brief pause filled with uncertainty before she finally agreed. Giandra and I understood the situation. We planned to find lodging as soon as we arrived in the village to respect Elena and her family's privacy. Elena picked us up at the nearest bus stop in her father's old Jeep. Although her face appeared slightly somber, she warmly welcomed us. Originally, we had intended to find lodging right away, but thunder and lightning in the sky signaled an impending downpour. That's why Elena quickly took us to her home. As soon as we arrived, the rain poured down heavily. Elena's parents greeted us warmly and advised us to stay the night instead of struggling to find accommodations in the heavy rain. However, it seemed that they were not feeling well. After dinner, they excused themselves to go to bed early. The three of us had planned to chat late into the night, but fatigue set in and Giandra and I quickly became drowsy. Eventually, Elena led us to her room. That night, the three of us slept in the same bed. Around 1 a.m., I woke up, needing to use the bathroom. The bathroom was near the kitchen. Upon returning, as I passed the living room, I noticed another room with its door slightly ajar. I peered inside, and to my surprise, the bedside lamp in the room was on, but there was no one in the bed. Elena only lived here with her parents. So, who was this room for, and why were we squeezed into Elena's room? Without much thought, I entered the room and went to sleep on the bed. I was too tired and sleepy to think any further, and I drifted off to sleep within minutes. After some minutes, someone brushed my hand away from their body. I couldn't open my eyes. I was too sleepy. I assumed it was Giandra who had come to join me. I mumbled a vague apology, or perhaps not at all, and continued my slumber. A few minutes later, the person next to me roughly pushed my hand away. It seemed they were growing impatient with my restless sleeping. I reluctantly forced my eyes open, trying to figure out who this person was. It couldn't be Giandra. She wasn't usually this strong. In the next moment, I was startled. There was a young man with long, disheveled hair lying next to me, covered in a white cloth. He was looking at me with anger, his gaze sharp and almost piercing. "Oh my, who is this?" Another member of Elena's family, perhaps her older brother? But why hadn't he appeared during dinner? I felt embarrassed, incredibly so. However, my brain couldn't function. The only thought that crossed my mind was to close my eyes and pretend to sleep. I hoped the young man would understand and move to another room or the living room without discussing this further. The next morning, I joined the others at the breakfast table, my head hung low in embarrassment. I couldn't imagine what I would do when I saw that young man again. Should I apologize, or should I pretend not to remember the events of last night? Oddly enough, the young man didn't show up until breakfast ended. Had he left early? After breakfast, Elena took Giandra and me for a walk around the village. With some hesitation, I finally told Elena about the previous night's events and asked about the young man's identity. To my astonishment, Elena seemed more shocked than I was. Even Giandra found it hard to believe that I had been so careless as to switch rooms without the homeowner's permission. It turned out that the young man with the long hair was Elena's older brother, but here was the problem: he had passed away just 4 days ago. Elena was perplexed as to why her brother had appeared in her dream the previous night, asking angrily, "Who is that audacious girl?" This time, it was my turn to be shocked. He had already passed away? In this village, it was believed that a deceased person's bed should not be occupied by anyone else for 40 days after their passing, as they believed that the spirit of the deceased still resided in the house during that period. That's why Elena's family hadn't offered us that room. I shuddered uncontrollably. It was hard for me to stand. The memory of those angry eyes haunted my thoughts. I couldn't believe it. I had slept in the same bed as a ghost. Oh God. I apologized to Elena's family for the incident. It was then that I truly understood their somber demeanor. However, they also apologized for not informing us earlier, as they didn't want to spoil our holiday mood by revealing this information upon our arrival. Oddly, it was me who had lost all interest in the holiday. I promptly invited Giandra to return home that very day. I was terrified when we had to enter the house to gather our belongings. As we left Elena's house, I caught a glimpse of someone looking at me from the window, the young man with long hair, his gaze just as angry as the previous night. I quickly turned away and hurried off, not daring to look back.